All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining in tonight. I know that other people will start to jump in as we continue the conversation, but I want to say welcome. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy week. I know if it was any week like I've had, you guys have had a very stressful and long week dealing with numerous things that are going on. And of course, yesterday, hearing the horrible news about Breonna Taylor and just the injustice there. I mean, I think this is perfect timing to have this conversation in light of that news and how we can definitely have our voices be heard with our vote. And I will say amen on that. So making sure that we have this conversation, and tonight it is about destroying the myths and the conspiracy theories of voting. I am a young adult pastor and have been a young adult pastor for a long time, dealing with youth and having different conversations with them. And so I thought that it would be best to bring other young adults to talk to young adults. And of course, other parents and other members of our family members are, of course, welcome to join in and listen. And we want you to replay this and post it for other family members to be able to listen to. But I felt that it was important to have young adults speak to young adults about the importance of voting and how we can dispel those myths to be educated, one, to be properly informed, two, and then three, go out and actually activate those voices that we have with our vote come November 3rd. So I'm going to say thank you again for joining your time out. Joining in on this call. This is sponsored by the GAP Ministry, the Young Adult Ministry of Hamilton Park United Methodist Church, with Dr. Sharon Patterson, where I am helping her with the Young Adult Ministry. I am a member of Friendship West Baptist Church, where my pastor is Pastor Frederick Douglass Haynes III. And so at this time, I want to talk a little bit about logistics, and then I'm going to introduce our panel. Our panelists. So logistics wise, we're asking that everyone, of course, would please mute your lines if you are not talking, if you're not answering a question or asking a question, being respectful just to make sure that we can reduce as much background noise as possible. So again, mute your lines. We're going to ask that during the questions, as the panelists are talking and discussing, providing their rebuttals, we want to engage you. So if we have started a question, post an additional question in the chat and I will bring that up as we're engaging in the conversation. You can post it in the chat. We will allot time before we move to the next question for you to ask a question or make a quick statement in between the questions. But just so that you know, at the end of the panelist questions, there will be time for Q&A. So if you need to think about your question, if there's something that we did not ask that you want to bring up, the Q&A time is to do that, not in between the panel questions. Does that make sense? We want to make sure it goes as smoothly as possible. All right. Then if nothing else, again, you have the chat posted in there, post your questions as they are discussing, make sure your lines are muted. And now I'm going to start in random order. As I introduce you, please wave your hand, do something, put one of these clap emoji signs up or whatever so that we know who you are, okay? So our wonderful panelists who have joined in today, I'm going to start with Attorney Warren C. Attorney Warren C. Oh, that's the wrong one. Hold on, let me get it. And we are recording tonight again to make sure that we can repost what we are talking about and make sure that it is widespread for others that could not join tonight to make sure they hear this wonderful information we're going to hear from our panelists. So Attorney Warren C. Jr. is an attorney with a commercial real estate and finance practice at Art Fox LLP law firm in Washington, D.C. Warren also served as the president of the DeSoto Independent School District Board of Trustees in DeSoto, Texas from 2009 to 2015. When initially elected, Warren became the youngest elected official in Texas. Subsequently, he was reelected 4 consecutive years as the board's president, making him the youngest board president in the United States. More recently, Warren has launched a campaign strategy firm, First Ballot Strategies, and has served as campaign manager for State Representative Representative Carl Sherman Sr. and DeSoto Mayor Kirstine S. McCowan, winning both elections with nearly 70% of the vote. Warren received his BA summa cum laude and Juris Doctorate cum laude from Southern Methodist University. So once again, welcome, Warren C. Jr. Attorney. Thank you. Kirstine McCowan currently resides in Colorado Springs, Colorado, but was raised in Dallas, Texas. She attended Duncanville schools for the majority of her primary education, and she earned her bachelor's degree from West Texas A&M University while competing on the volleyball and track and field teams. She then went on to earn her master's at the University of Oklahoma while working as a graduate assistant in the athletic department. She is currently the assistant commissioner of the Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference. Welcome, Kirstine. Minister Christian S. Watkins. He is a 2019-2020 Wendland Fellow for Faith and Justice of the General Board of Church and Society of the United Methodist Church recipient. He is specifically tasked with leading and participating in the coordination of Advocates for Justice initiative with the North and Central Texas annual conferences. He is equipping laity and clergy justice seekers to be deployed for faithful actions in the local, state, and federal civic arenas. Christian is a May 2019 graduate of Southern Methodist University Perkins School of Theology recipient of a Master of Divinity degree with a concentration in urban ministry focused in social justice. Welcome, Minister Christian. Tiara Cooper. Tiara Cooper is a Faith in Texas organizer. She is an emerging Dallas leader who is passionate about faith, justice, and local grassroots empowerment. Experiencing a felony conviction as a teen, it propelled Tiara Cooper into a lifetime mission of liberation to end mass incarceration, felony disenfranchisement, and dismantle the historical systems of white supremacy. Advocate, mobilizer, organizer, and social change agent, she advocates at the local, state, and federal level on policy issues affecting directly impacted people, people with criminal convictions, and those currently incarcerated. She desires to shift local and state resources from incarceration and law enforcement and to invest them into the needs directly impacting the communities. Welcome, Tiara. Kelly Warren Sebron Esquire. An East Liberty native, Kelly Ware Sebron is a product of Pittsburgh Public Schools and a graduate of the University of Pittsburgh. After starting her family, working in community development and as a tip staff, she attended Northeastern University School of Law in Boston. There she earned concentrations in poverty law and economic justice, as well as in law and development. Upon returning to Pittsburgh, Kelly worked as a staff attorney, focusing on tenants' rights at Neighborhood Legal Services. Ware Sebron was also the inaugural recipient of Equity and Diversity and Inclusion. She was the policy analyst for the city of Pittsburgh and served as executive director of the NAACP Pittsburgh's branch. Welcome, Kelly. And last but not least, we have Reverend Edwin Robinson. He is a Dallas Black clergy for safety, equity, and justice. Along with just over 2 decades of Christian ministry experience, Reverend Edwin Robinson is one of the founders of Dallas Black Clergy for Safety, Equity, and Justice. Dallas Black Clergy is a Dallas, Texas-based Black-owned and operated civil rights organization that educates and organizes faith and community leaders while creating actionable strategies to address and ultimately eradicate the pervasive social evils of racial, gender, and economic oppression in Texas. Reverend Robinson is also a political and civic organizing consultant, working particularly for the liberation of Black people and by extension of all people. Edwin fundamentally believes in the power of people. He believes through the power of people of faith and leadership of those who have been made to be the least of these, and we can dismantle the systems of oppression that continue to create the poor and powerless in our world. Edwin also holds a Master's of Theological Studies with a focus on faith alongside Black people and cultures in the United States from the Duke Divinity School. Welcome, Reverend Edwin Robinson. So we're going to give you all a virtual hand clap. Thank you all for joining. All right, let's go ahead and just kick it off with the first question. So to dispel the myths and conspiracy theories that we have that are out there that are most known, one of the main things is that voting does not matter. Voting doesn't matter. A lot of millennials feel, and I'll say a lot, and some of the things that I say, it doesn't mean all, but a lot of millennials feel as if voting doesn't help advocate for our people because voting is rigged and the candidate can buy out their votes or rig the polls. So what do you say to individuals who feel that this is the case? I will leave it open for whoever would like to kick it off. Okay, maybe I need to pick somebody. Let's start with Sister Tiara. Tiara, let's start with you with that one. So what do you say if millennials feel like, you know, voting doesn't really advocate for people, it's rigged, they can buy out their vote, or it's going to be hacked in some way? What do you say to dispel that myth?
Well, I'll first say electoral fraud is a myth in itself. Voting is not only important, voting is vital. It's vital. Our ancestors fought long and hard for us to vote. Formerly incarcerated people cannot vote in certain states, depending on what they have done. Like our societies worked way too hard for us not to vote, that you have to kind of question what is the importance behind voting. For one, voting is just directly connected to resources. It's directly connected to power. It's directly connected to how we use our voice. It's directly just connected to so much that it's far too important to not vote. Of course, there's multiple ways we can shift power. Voting is just one way. It's one thing that I try to tell people, like, yeah, voting isn't going to change the world overnight, but we definitely have to participate in the current systems that are currently operating. And voting is how we shape the policies that we want to reflect in our communities overall. So I would just say, you know, to anyone young out there, and they're probably a first-time voter. Last year was my first time voting, and I had a lot of conspiracy theories, and it wasn't because I was young, but it was because I was formerly incarcerated, and I didn't know what this process was going to feel like, look like, and it was just kind of like, oh, it was a lot overall, but it was important to me, and that moment forever resonates with me because I remember not being able to vote. I remember telling people, knocking on doors, doing very grassroots work over the last 4 years in the last election, and being devastated, seeing people cry the last 4 years ago, and feeling like, wow, maybe my vote could have changed, and maybe my cousin's vote could have changed something, or the people that I know, if they would have actually got out and voted, or had they been able to, maybe we could have possibly changed the political arena. We could have shifted some power in our direction. So that's ultimately what we do when we vote. We shift power in our direction. We should want a government that's for the people and by the people. Our government should reflect us, you know, it should reflect our needs, our wants, and what we want to see.
Excellent. Panel rebuttal.
You know, I want to echo what Tiara had to say, and say that us as Americans, we live here, we pay taxes here, we spend our money here, and voting is one of our ways of holding our people accountable, holding government officials accountable. And as you know, people say that the most used word of 2019 was toxic, and the least used word was accountability. You know, that's voting is the one way of removing toxins from our, you know, political sphere and holding our people accountable, holding those people that we pay for accountable. If voting didn't matter, why are conservatives, why are career politicians, why are interlopers, you know, in the system that we're supposed to be draining the swamp, but are restocking the swamp here in DC with more vicious vicious animals that are causing more problems than they're worth, participating or galvanizing corporate interests rather than the interests of the people. If all that didn't matter, why is it so hard for us to act?
I think we had a slight glitch.
All throughout this country, the voter disenfranchisement. They're closing down multiple polling sections. They're making it harder for people to vote. There's all these problems there's all these problems that have been created in order for people to exercise their vote. If it wasn't that hard, if it wasn't that important, why are they trying so hard to keep you from voting? This shirt I'm wearing right now says "Justice is love out loud," and for it. It has become real since I've lived here in DC for the past year. Especially right now as I'm looking next door at the Supreme Court, I'm seeing all the love that's being shown to Justice Bader Ginsburg. And to know the sacrifices she had to make throughout her career, not being seen as a lawyer, even though she graduated from Harvard. And the constant hurdles that she had to go through in order to become a 27-year Supreme Court justice, to see all the love that she's being shown, that's real. But we also have to ask ourselves, if we want justice, if we love ourselves, why can't we act in justice? Why can't we act through justice to make sure that justice happens for us? America has proven time and time again that America does not love us. The institutions are not built for us. The Constitution doesn't even talk about African Americans, let alone other minorities, let alone anybody else other than rich white male landowners, until it gets to the amendments, right? And the only reason those amendments are in there is because people voted, died, and bled to vote people in place in order to establish those amendments and to build on America's original sins, which are racism, to reconstruct America's original sins. So I say, voting, that's our lifeline, and we've got to use it. We've got to own it.
Attorney C.
Thank you, Ms. Crispy. And I agree with Tierra and Christian. And I think Christian said something that was very important. He said career politicians in the middle of his response. And it made me think about something. In every myth or in every sort of a nuance that we hear from people who don't want to vote, there's a rim of truth, right? So there's something about that myth that people can latch onto. And I think the first step in dispelling the myth is acknowledging that there is some truth here, right? So when you talk about how do we get to the place that we have career politicians, a lot of it goes back to the fact that there is a gerrymandering problem in this country. And when you look at the folks in Austin and in Washington, D.C., a lot of them are elected in large part because they can draw congressional districts that only have voters that they want in them. And so you end up with this system where it's non-competitive elections for the most part. You end up in a state like Texas with the overwhelming majority of Republicans in power. There's no need to compromise. And so if you are a Democratic voter in Texas, for example, you do feel disenfranchised. You do feel like you're out of power. So there is a rim of truth in the fact that you have to work hard to get things done. And one way I want to emphasize that is that voting matters, but a lot of people think they can vote in a presidential election and that will solve the problem. If you're not voting in every May election, in every November election, in Texas, in Dallas County, for example, every May you're going to have a city council race and a school board race, bar none. You can count on it. Every November, regardless of if the president's on the ballot, regardless of if the governor's on the ballot, there could be nobody on the ballot at all. There could be an amendment to the Constitution. But there's going to be an election every single May and every single November of every year. And so you have to continually vote. And it can't be a one-time exercise. And so when we think about, making change through our vote, and Tierra mentioned this, it's not the only thing you can do. But if you do it continually, then you become a part of the process. Because I can tell you from the campaign side, and I've had the privilege of running quite a few campaigns in Southern Dallas County. What happens when you start looking at how to run a campaign? the first thing you do is you access something called the Voter Access Network. Okay, this is a system that is maintained by both political parties, both Democrats and Republicans. And this system has all the data on every single person who has ever voted in Dallas County or in the state of Texas. And it's honestly throughout the country. And it's so scientific now that they'll know what election you voted in, what primary you voted in. We don't know who you voted for, but the data on how often you vote, if you vote in midterm elections, if you vote in runoff elections, all that stuff is available to the political consultants. And when you are a candidate and you're deciding what items you're going to address on your agenda, when you're deciding what policies you're going to push first when you come in office, what are you going to look at? You're going to look at the data of the people that actually vote in every election. And it's not just the presidential election. So when we think about being impactful, you have to think about folks that are 65 and older, they're not going to miss an election, period. They're going to vote in, it could be the middle of the summer while some millennials are out, hanging out and punching, they're not going to miss that election though. So when you talk about folks getting their issues addressed, a lot of times it's not so much as just voting in November and feeling like you've done something. It's voting every single time, because that's what the consultants are tracking. And that's really the people that get their issues addressed. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality of the system that we've created, because we vote so often in this country. So when we think about it, let's think about encouraging people to vote often, every single time, and never miss an election.
That's a great point. Great point. Not just the national election or the presidential election that happens in November, but every election. Those local elections are key as well. Absolutely. Anybody else? The other panelists? Yes, Kirsten.
So I just wanted to add, vote in every election, but also don't be discouraged by who you see on the ballot. So like she said, I live in Colorado Springs, and if you're an unaffiliated party member, you're not affiliated with either party, you can vote in primaries. Well, I looked at my 2 ballots and I saw that there were no Democrats running for the DA slot. So I took it upon myself to vote on the Republican primary, because I want my voice heard for who's going to be our next DA. I don't have an option over here, so I'm going to vote for one of these options over here. So you also have to take those things into consideration. I know it's not the same in Texas, or it's not the same in a lot of places, but that was a decision that I had to sit there and make. Am I seriously going to vote in a Republican primary? You right, I am, because I want to have a say in who the DA is going to be specifically in this county.
Great point. Others?
I'll say something really quickly. I think to your actual question, if there's a myth, the myth is that my vote will not count. If there's a truth, the truth is that my vote may not count. So I guess what I'm saying is we've all laid out a very good argument for why our votes don't count in America. And particularly speaking to millennials and the generation that's coming after us, millennials, I'm an elder millennial, I think it's imperative to agree with the truth and not jump to our talking point. And the truth is that, yeah, it's a possibility you'll cast your vote and it won't count. It's also a possibility you'll cast your vote and it will count. And so the question really becomes, how much do you want to participate? I mean, we can all just throw up our hands and say, forget about it. I'll just chill at home, or we can get involved. And that's really the line. If I have to convince you with the stony road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, and Breonna Taylor was just shot and her killers weren't convicted, then that's a whole set of conversations that I don't have time to have between now and November 3rd, or in Texas, October 13th. And so I think just stipulating to the reality of what people say, and then saying, and we got to vote anyway. I mean, I think that that's just the truth.
So I just want to add to what Brother Edwin was saying, that while your vote may not count, and versus what if it does, is up here in Pittsburgh, we are a ridiculous football town. where if you don't pay attention to, you know, what the Steelers did on Sunday, you have nothing to talk about with anybody casually until the next Monday, right? It's a little absurd. But so it's one of those things where you hear about bad calls made by the ref, et cetera, et cetera. And I've always been of the unpopular opinion is like, we shouldn't have made it that close, man. If we went out there and we, you know, just pounded the other team into submission, then a bad call here or there is not going to cost you the game, right? If it was 72-3 because you held them to a field goal and you did your thing, there ain't nothing to talk about. Refs can't steal that from you. They take off 3 touchdowns, you still won. So really, we need to just do our part and, you know, have a little faith. Black folks, generally, we are a people of faith. We would not have made it this far if we were not. And we need to just do our part and really try to get that 72, hold them to a field goal. And that is how, even if they take off a couple of your goals, you still turn out to be successful. Sorry for the sports analogies. Like I said, we are a mercilessly football town. But that's really how I feel about it, is that if you beat them so bad that they can't steal it, that is really our goal, as far as I'm concerned.
That's a great point. Great point. I mean, it just comes into one, people have fought, bled, and died for us to have the right to vote. We need to exercise our right to vote. And if we complain about our voices not being heard, the first question we're going to ask is, did you vote? That is where the start of the change happens, right? In voting. So let me move to the next question. Of course, it was an absolute great analogy. I loved it. Second question we have is another conspiracy theory, and I am going to throw this one to Tiara just because you also mentioned it in your first rebuttal, is that some of our friends and family members in our African American community, you know, they have been incarcerated. So a lot of people feel like, well, if I've been incarcerated, I can't vote or I can't register to vote because then I'm going back to jail. I've had family members who have gone to jail. Other young adults that I've talked to are like, I got a record, I can't vote. So we know that there are differences in different states. How do we figure that out? Is that a conspiracy theory? Can they vote? Let's start with you, Tiara, to help us understand that.
Yeah, for sure. So it's definitely not a conspiracy theory world, like, you know, globally or anything. Because here in the state of Texas, once you're finished with your probation or parole, once you've completed all your supervision, you can vote in the state of Texas. But in other places, that may or may not be the case. It's important for us to dispel the myth that there is a lifetime ban, because probation officers, attorneys, no one is actively telling anybody any of this. So we just kind of go with what we know. And it's not until, you know, someone in the community or someone who's invested, you know, in voter engagement actually like tells people like, yeah, you can actually get out there and vote. Not only that, but if you can't pay, you can't vote. And what I mean by that is, like, if you, for instance, have completed your time, your sentence, but you have fines and fees. If you can't pay your fines and fees, you have to be completely off of everything. So your fees that are connected directly to your probation or your sentencing, that has to be completely paid off as well in the state of Texas in order for you to be able to participate. So I'm always just actively encouraging folks. Even this past weekend in the community, one guy was just like, dang, I didn't even know I could vote. And he was just so happy to get registered to vote. And then another guy was like, well, I'm on papers for another 4 months, so I won't be able to vote for the next 4 years. So it was just like important for me to let them know, well, no, you don't have to wait the next 4 years, but how about, you know, you vote in the local elections? And then I was able to talk to him more about local politics and how they really play a large part in how our roads look and how many food stamps our mama get the next month. Like, these are a lot of the processes that we must participate in. So I think it's important that we educate across the board, especially when it comes to formerly incarcerated people or convicted people, because there's a lot that they're not telling us intentionally, especially here in the state of Texas. And I don't know about about anybody else, but I was tired of feeling powerless. I was tired of feeling like, you know, I had no voice, because ultimately that's what incarceration does to you. It makes you feel like you're powerless. You have no voice. You have no say so. You continue to pay your debt to society over and over and over and over. And you no longer feel like a citizen. You feel alienated from your own community. So voting was very important to me coming out of jail. It was very important that I understood the processes and that I was able to spread that with other formerly incarcerated people.
Thank you for that. And we do have a flyer that I'm going to post in here that if you want to find out more information on if you are incarcerated, there is a number you can call, a link that you can go to do some more research. But anybody else, any of the other panelists, your thoughts on that conspiracy theory that if you have been incarcerated, you cannot register to vote?
Yeah, I think I just want to say everything that, you know, Tara's the expert, right? So what she said, I think what I want to add on to it is for those of us who are not incarcerated, this is why our vote is so much more important. Because the reality is voting is the only right that every American citizen should have and never should be taken away, no matter what you've done, no matter how horrible someone thinks you are, how great someone thinks you are. Every American citizen should have the ability to vote, that period. And so those of us who don't have to worry about, are we on papers or are we not on papers? Do we have a conviction or do we not have a conviction? We should be voting in droves so that we can change the policies for our sisters and brothers who are having to deal with this, and for our sisters like Tiara and so many others that are working around the country to ensure that every citizen, no matter what situation you find yourself in, has the right and the ability to vote.
Excellent. Absolutely.
I wholeheartedly agree, and just wanted to point out some of the rules in Pennsylvania. If you are previously incarcerated, if you are not currently incarcerated on a felony, you can vote in the state of Pennsylvania. If you are incarcerated now in Pennsylvania, but you'll be out in time for the election, you can register to vote. And where you would use your address is to where, if you have access to where you lived previous to going to jail, you would use that address. But if you also know where you're going to be afterwards, you can use that address. And you have until October 19th to register to vote. If you're currently incarcerated on a misdemeanor in Pennsylvania, you can vote. So just it varies from state to state. Unfortunately, I think there should be no rule. You're a citizen, you should be able to vote. That's my opinion. I think it's part of, you know, the way that they use to keep them, one of the many methods that they use to keep us down as a people, because we know we are over incarcerated. But just so for the rules in Pennsylvania, if you are not going to be incarcerated on a felony, for a felony on November 3rd, you're able to register to vote, and you go to votespa.com.
Thank you, Kelly.
I would also just add that if you have any loved ones in a county jail that have not been convicted of anything, or they are out, you know, on bond or on bail, they can vote. And if they call you video visitation or write you, definitely, you know, send them some information. You can send them a mail-in ballot, because although they have those at the law libraries and things of that nature, they aren't encouraging people or even like giving them the awareness that that is there and is even an option. So a lot of times that is another way that they, you know, put people in our communities down. They criminalize our communities, and then they block our vote by, you know, giving us felony convictions. And it's just, it's ridiculous. But all that to say is, like, if you do have loved ones that are in a county and, you know, working through their case, working through their trial, they have not been convicted of anything, they can vote, right? They can vote. So just to add that.
So what we're hearing is that it's not a blanket no, everybody. It's not a blanket no. You need to do research. You need to tell your friends, your family members, if they have been convicted, arrested, charged, in prison, you need to just tell them to research. Go and research to find out, because it's not just a blanket no. So thank you for that. Any other panelists, any other questions on that one? Okay, then I will move on to the next question. So some millennials I have talked to personally. I have, again, it's not providing a blanket statement across the board. So let me put that caveat out there and disclaimer. Not every single millennial believes this way, but I have talked to some who have expressed the fact that outside of Trump's poor ethical stance, that he has done more for us by providing stimulus checks than President Obama ever did. So he may not be a good person. He may be horrible when it comes to his ethical morals and standards and values. But as far as my well-being and keeping that intact, he has done more for me than President Obama. So what would your response be to that claim if they're using that and a stimulus check to provide their evidence or justification as to why they should vote for President Trump versus the other party? Just in general, not even picking out one party or the other. What would your stance be to someone who believes that way?
I'm going to go ahead and jump out the gate on this one. First of all, you've given him credit for something he did not do. Congress did that, not Donald Trump. So also, this question implies that he just bought your vote with $1,200. So refer back to question one, and let's, talk about that again. So also, when we talk about well-being, I can get on my soapbox about this. I'll be short though. We just found out that he knew well before we reacted to COVID-19 that it was in this country. So if you want to talk about our well-being, he didn't do anything. He let us sit here and get sick and 200,000 people die. So consider that as a part of the well-being of this country. And don't let $1,200 blind you to what is really going on.
We can now just get one of these just real quick. Just, I mean,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Edwin.
Yeah, I've had to respond to this, and I think that I would respond in this way. I think first I would say that Obama's not on the ticket. And so the very first, we're not talking about a decision between Donald Trump and Barack Obama. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, I think, not even say, I think I really want to say to us is that one of the things I think we're going to have to realize is that the people we're talking to, hierarchy of needs is a very real thing. And so if someone gets $1,200 in their bank account, I don't care what you say. I don't care what facts you lay out. I don't care what you talk about. $1,200 showed up in my bank account while Donald Trump was in office and his name was on the check. So hierarchy of needs says, is Joe Biden going to put $1,200 in my bank account? Is Kamala Harris going to put $1,200 in my bank account? So I say that to say, before we jump in with our responses, sometimes we need to consider the source and who is actually, if someone is saying, look, he gave me $1,200, and let's also be clear that most of us who are middle-class Black Americans, our economics have not gotten worse during the age of Donald Trump. Now, that doesn't mean that we need to vote for him. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying facts are facts. And let's not go around facts to make our point, right? What I'm saying is we can still make our point without disregarding someone else's reality, right? And that's really what I'm saying. I think the first thing we need to do when people are coming at us is say, look, you know what? You're right. He gave you a check. However, Obama's not running for office. And then to Kristen's point and probably many others, then we go on and talk about all the crap, right, that Donald Trump has actually done. But I think first stipulating to people's reality and meeting people where they are, as we say, meet people where they are, but don't leave them there. I think that's some of the best ways to respond. Some of the ways that I've responded and actually made people go, you know what? That is kind of right. $1,200 ain't a lot. It was something, but it wasn't a lot.
I would add that Obama did give us $1,200 in 2008 when we first hit the recession. We forget because it was 12 years ago because he's not on the ballot because it's old news politically speaking. But when given the opportunity in a similar economic crisis, he did break people off with a similarly sized check. And I would also point out that we were alive to spend it because we were not in a pandemic that he allowed to go unchecked. We had Ebola and he snatched it up. And we did not have 200,000 Americans dead. So it's, again, Obama is not on the ballot, but if you are making that comparison, it does not actually turn out in Trump's favor. Although I do understand you have to meet people where they are. $1,200 can be a lot of money and a big boost to your account. And I can't speak specifically to what Joe and Kamala would do, although I do believe that they are in support of stimulus packages that go above and beyond that $1,200. But if you're making the comparison between Trump and Obama, he's been there and done that, and he already did provide that stimulus money for us.
I want to, if you would allow me, I do apologize for having to leave and come back. I was having technical difficulties, but I want to push Edwin's point a little bit further. So I gathered that you all were talking about the comparison between Trump and Obama, and the $1,200 stimulus check that was certified by Congress, that was signed by President Trump. I do want to make it a point that, you know, $1,200, it did some things. It helped me out here on Capitol Hill. Helped me pay down some debt and pay off some bills and whatnot, and I am greatly appreciative of it. I'm appreciative of Congress doing their work and making sure that that package was, that initial COVID stimulus package was secured. However, I do want to point out that the fact that the grand old party is Trump's party now, and they have been systemically oppressing further stimulus packages. And we got to understand that $1,200 could have been $1,200 every 2 weeks if the House, if the Democratic led House had been able to pass a similar, if the Senate had been able to pass a similar bill that the House had passed. But the Senate, the Republican-controlled Senate constantly fought back and did not pass additional stimulus package bills. We're still waiting on Capitol Hill here for another stimulus package, which I want to offer a shameless plug that the Washington Interfaith Staff Community is actually hosting a prayer vigil next Tuesday, this upcoming Tuesday, in response to the Senate needing to pass another COVID stimulus package. So it's up to us to stand up and raise our voices to make sure that Americans can be made whole and poor Americans can be supported in this time, and those who are financially depressed can receive another stimulus package. But we got to tell truth where it is. The Republican Party has consistently kept people oppressed since the Southern strategy was employed during the Nixon years, right? And Trump is an extension of that racist history that the Republican Party has. So if we really want to boil things down to the nitty-gritty, to its basis, that $1,200 did go far, but how much further could it have gone? How much more stimulus package, how much more help could Americans have had if we had people in office who were actually advocating and legislating on our behalf and not corporate interests?
I think Attorney C wants to say something.
Yeah, I would just add there that it goes back to question number one, and in terms of the myth of your vote not counting and voting consistently in every election. So when you look back in 2009, Obama did have both houses of Congress at that time. It was a Democratic sweep, and in 2010, I think the public, in a lot of ways, young millennials, we were in college at the time, did not turn out in those midterm elections. The moment we lost Congress, you know, the entire agenda changes, right? So everything that Obama put up was blocked. And so essentially he was governing by executive order. He was governing through the federal agencies, Department of Labor, Department of Energy. He was governing using his presidential power in his bully pulpit. And so the importance of always voting and understanding the intersectionality between having a Congress on your side and not, you know, it can't be understated here. I think the prime example, you know, of this in action is that if you look at the criminal justice reform package that President Obama was proposing after he lost Congress, it mirrors, and in fact, it's in fact much better than the First Step Act, which was signed by President Trump. 2 years ago. And the fact of the matter is, the Republicans blocked Obama's passage of this bill at every single term. You know, they would not put the bill up for a vote in the Senate. And as soon as President Trump is elected, the First Step Act is passed into law. Now, there can be some explanations from that, right? A, they don't want to give Obama a win, but we've all been in a position, or most of us have been in a position of being the first Black anything or the only Black anything. And we know not only the pressure that comes with that, but the opposition that we're often faced with. And so I don't take it not lightly. I'm not an Obama apologist, right? So there are certainly things that we could have done during the Obama years better for Black people, right? And in this new administration, if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were elected, we would expect certain things to be done, right? And we would have no expectations for them to let us down. But on the same token, the president had to deal with what the cards he were dealt. And when we did not turn out in those midterm elections and we lost Congress, we inhibited in a lot of ways what Obama was able to get done, because the same legislation that he had put up for a vote, in fact, it was better legislation, was ended up being signed into law by President Trump, in large part because Republicans were not opposing him because he's a Republican, but also he's a wealthy white man. So the public was more palatable to having a criminal justice reform bill passed when the person that was putting it up, looked like them or somebody they, quote, could trust. So, that's just my spiel to add to it, is that voting in every single election is critically important, because when you lose Congress, you really inhibit your president's ability to do his job.
Thank you, Attorney C. I know, Tiara, you were going to add something to that as well, and then I'm going to hit it back to either Kelly or Kirsten if they want to close it up. But go ahead, Tiara.
Yeah, I just echo what everyone already stated, like y'all laid it out plain and clear, and what everyone was stating definitely resonated with me personally, and I believe it will resonate with students, because, people, we definitely need that money. But I think for me is we have to shift our people's vision. We have to cast a prophetic vision in our communities where people can actually start looking at things more systemically and holistically, so that we can actually approach, why do we need this $1,200 check? Why isn't there affordable health care? Well, really start thinking about the issues in a deeper lens is what we need for people to do in order to really be able to see what's going on. Because that's mass violence that Donald Trump is contributing to when he is, a white man standing there handing you out a handout, but you actually can systemically change my conditions. I can have a livable wage. I don't have to see my mama struggling every other day. That's what you can potentially do, but instead you prefer to give me a one-time handout, a one-time refund. That is not what we need, nor is that what we asked for. So yes, it does come in handy, but we need more than what comes in handy in these times. So I think for me, I would definitely agree with that student. I would definitely be with that person or for that moment. But there definitely has to be a shift where you have to cast the vision. It has to be casted, because we can easily lose vision. Even today, even this week, like it's very easy to get buried underneath all of it. And like, why, why should I care? Why should I do this? But there's a vision, there's a promised land for us believers. There is something that we're pressing towards all the times. And it has to be constantly at the forefront, because it's why we do what we do. It's why our ancestors fought, bled, and died. It's why we go hard every day. So that has to be in our hearts and our minds at all times. Like I said, that's mass violence. We got to even start realizing how we look at violence as a people. People get convicted of crimes, and our behaviors are criminalized when others are not. And what Donald Trump and his friends and his homeboys are doing is mass violence. They are killing. How many people have died because of COVID-19? Not even let alone this $1,200 check. But I'm just saying, how many people have died when he could have taken preventative measures? So yes, this money came in handy, but it does not in any way pay the debt that I feel that is owed to our people, past or present.
I'm sorry, Miss Grigsby, but Tiara, you just woke up something in my spirit, so I feel like I got to respond to something that you just said, and it was brilliantly put, and I have not been able to articulate it like you just did, so I want to thank you for saying it. And it is about vision. It is about thinking about this stuff holistically. And the point of the CARES Act was supposed to be to save small businesses and to save folks who were everyday workers. But for every $1,200 check that was written, there was a corporation in this company who got much more of that welfare. And I know because I work in a corporate law firm, and that CARES Act provided a whole lot of funding for companies who hide their assets in what's called single purpose entities. And this is, I'm going to break this down quickly, but these corporations, they create these entities that the sole job is to hold a business. So they might hold this apartment complex that I'm in right now. That company, even though they may have been $1 billion in earnings last year, was still able to apply for welfare through Donald Trump's CARES Act. And you saw this. We saw companies giving back these CARES Act funds while there were small businesses who were going broke and going under because the banks ran out of money, right? And Congress had to come back to renew the CARES Act funding. So when we talk about that $1,200, we have to be able to reach people so they understand that that was a whole lot more that was going to folks on Wall Street than that were going to folks on Real Street. And so, Tiara, thank you for putting that in context. And we have to be able to message that, right? So that folks see that this is not just about $1,200. This is about people that didn't need money and corporations and billion-dollar profit holders getting bailed out through the CARES Act, that folks like us, if we're not, in that room when it happens, we'll never see it. And so that's the only point I just wanted to add, is that, we have to understand this on a much deeper level.
Warren, thank you very much for bringing that up, and Tiara, thank you very much for exposing that mentality that we have. We as African Americans have been accepting crumbs from masters' tables since we came off the plantation, and we've been conditioned to just own the crumbs and only scrounge for crumbs and only think in that minimized mentality. But when God created the world, he created enough for everybody. God has given us everything that we need, and it's our duty, to fight for what's ours, right? So if our vote does not matter, then our lives don't matter, and then we can, put the whole Black Lives Matter hashtag away. But if we really think our lives matter, then we have to come to honor the fact that we're owed. We have what we need, but we need recognition of what we're owed, right? And so, like, to Warren's point, who made sure that those corporate benefits were included in those congressional packages? Republicans. Who made sure, and also some career Democrats. I will say that. But at the same time, if we are not going to vote, then we don't have, credence, and we don't have credibility when we talk about, oh, the man is oppressing me. The man, if we aren't participating in the system, then we can't unravel the system in order to come off from under it and to go for what's ours. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you all. For that question. And for those that are just joining in, some millennials were saying that Trump has done more for us than President Obama did. So, even though he may not have the ethical standards and values, then, maybe he's done more for us. So maybe my vote should go to him. But I loved what everyone has said and taken that to heart. But Kirsten, I think you jumped it from the gate. And it really is a matter of making sure that, $1,200 shouldn't buy you, right? We know that we do need the money, we need the funds, but the fact that we were even put in the predicament in the first place, because he didn't do due diligence and did not do his job properly, we should not have had to receive the $1,200 in the first place. So please take that into consideration as you are. I can't tell you who to vote for, but good Lord knows that I don't want Trump back in again for another term. So please, please, please make sure that you are correcting your vision, as Tiara has said, and shifting to make sure that you're realizing what it is that you're doing. Next question that we are going to bring up here. So, what are your thoughts regarding an additional conspiracy theory around mail-in ballots? There is a huge controversy and constant. As soon as you turn on the TV, every news station has something about this mail-in ballot. We have 3 states right now that are on mail-in ballot. They need so many more in order to make sure that, you know, those states can do it. There's a lot of conversation around it. So mail-in ballots and how those can go awry, right? There's a concern around if I mail in my ballot, it's not going to be valid, or somebody can screw with it and mess it up. There's potential hazards associated with that, but then also the actual electronic ballot, that when I go in person to do my electronic ballot, it's just going to get hacked by the Russians. That's what I'm hearing. So how do you mitigate those concerns to make sure that you're voting either way, whether by mail-in ballot because of COVID or in person electronically? What would you say to somebody who has concerns about that?
Much of what President Trump's platform has been based off of is fear-mongering, instilling fear and instilling confusion and doubt in the American citizen. My pastor just talked on just preached this past Sunday. Pastor Richie Butler at St. Luke just preached on fear versus faith. You know, we were not born with a spirit of fear, but a spirit of joy, happiness, and a sound mind. We have to use our sound mind in order to understand that there is a risk that comes with anything. There's a risk when you walk out of your front door. There's a risk when you step out of your bed in the morning. So are you willing to take the risk and make sure that your vote counts, regardless of what anybody else does, right? Because we know that, I mean, even, and also, like, there's a lot of TV programs out there. I think, I can't remember the last one I watched, but there was one that, I forgot the name of the TV show, but basically, some hacker got control of some voting machines, and for every 5 votes that were cast, one of them went to the other party. So it automatically skewed. But I mean, anything can happen, right? But we have to put trust in ourselves and our ability and what God gave us, and then also and I know it's hard to trust the system, but there are people in place who are trying to make sure that we have fair and safe elections. And when we show up, and if more people show out, then there can be no question as to the results of the elections. So why put your friends in jeopardy if you don't want to take a risk, if you dare not to take the risk?
Others, what are your thoughts?
I just want to add that the beauty of us having access to Al Gore's internet is that these are things that you can start to research as well, on your phones, in your homes, at the library, wherever. So this question kind of stumped me too, because I was like, I personally have never thought this, but I wonder why people would think that. So I did some research, and in my research, I found that there hasn't really been evidence of the machines being hacked. What there is evidence of is misinformation being spread on social media. That's where the evidence is. So when it comes to conspiracy theories, let's peel it back and do some research and see what we can actually find answers on in whatever we have access to. The other thing I want to point out about conspiracy theories in general when it comes to voting is, who stands to gain from you believing these conspiracy theories? You don't gain anything from believing this and saying, well, then I'm not going to vote. And Edwin made a point earlier. This might be true. Your vote might not count, but it also might count. So which one do you want to take a risk on?
Attorney C, did you have your hand up? No? Okay. Edwin, were you going to say anything? Go ahead, Riff.
Yeah, no, all I'm gonna say is, I think we should just stipulate to the fact that they're going to cheat. Like, then I don't, you see what I'm saying? Like, if I stipulate to the fact that they're going to cheat because they cheated, right? Not like, because that's what they do, right? Like, well, then, yeah, they're going to cheat. I would say that there are ways that we can try to mitigate that. right? And one of the ways to mitigate it is vote early. You know what I mean? Vote on the first day of voting. You know, don't wait until November 3rd, the last day of voting. I don't call it election day. I call it the last day of voting. So vote on the first day of voting in your state. In Texas, it's October 13th. Make a plan to show up on October 13th with you and 5 other people. Also, become a poll worker, a poll watcher. If we have people at the sites, then we're able to track who came in, and then we can say, hey, y'all reporting that this many people voted in my, you know, at my spot, but I was there, right? Something's not right, something's fishy. And then the other thing is push your congregations, particularly if you know, your congregations, community centers, whatever it is, particularly if you're in an area that's a low propensity voting area, push for them to become a polling location so that you can ensure that the people in your community also vote. I say all that to say, and just like Kelly has laid out, that means we got to run up the numbers. It means we got to work a little harder. So I think these are the things that we can do to try to mitigate the reality. I keep saying it over and over again because I want people to get it in their spirit. The reality that they are going to cheat. That's the point.
One thing my mother has always said to me, and I'm pretty sure y'all have heard it too, is that we got to be better than best to be seen as half as good. It applies to voting as well. We gotta do our best. We gotta do better than best. You know, get our butts to the polls, get our friends to the polls, get our grandparents and our aunts and uncles. Make sure that everybody goes to the polls so we can be seen better than half as good. Because if somebody's gonna cheat, they're gonna take a little bit of fraction. If somebody does cheat, they're gonna take a little fraction out of the whole piece. And if we all get together and get all souls to the polls, you know, then there won't be any, there should not be any question as to what the will of the people, of Black people are. You know, I was looking at stats, I was looking at the eligible voter stats from 2016. You know, it was 26% of the people voted for Clinton, 26% of the people voted for Trump. 48% of people, of eligible voters, who reportedly did not vote. What happened to them? So, I mean, just as, you know, Obama's election 2 times was a critical election for us, you know, actual people's lives are on the line this time. Like, we've already seen 200,000 people plus, still counting, you know, succumbing to the consequences, to the negative consequences of last election. Are we going to continue that same, are we going to continue in that same way?
And I would just add to be careful in terms of, Kirsten had mentioned going on and doing your research. Yes, you can research, you know, voter fraud and things like that in general, but also see how they're going to trick you. See, you know, like in Pennsylvania, we just had a Supreme Court decision about this double envelope situation. I don't know if anybody's followed, but it's a mess. Like there's an envelope, like you do your ballot, you put it in an envelope, and then you put it in another envelope. If you miss the middle envelope, they don't count it. You know, I felt really dumb because I was, you know, director of NAACP at the time, and I messed up my mail-in ballot because I hadn't been told and hadn't heard in all of my NAACP research, right, that it mattered, that they sent out separate ballots where it mattered who was who in your household. So I signed my husband's ballot, put it in an envelope, and dropped it in the mail. Didn't realize till he comes home, he's like, oh, I thought you voted. Here's your ballot. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, your name's on it here in this tiny print on this outside, you know, like, oh, so I voted as you, so your vote doesn't count. So now I'm calling the elections office. I'm trying to figure out, what do I do? Nobody answered me. And this is in, you know, we've got a Democratic governor, you were in a Democratic county, we've got Republican controlled legislature. But so it really was kind of an even mix because you have the different branches of government with different control. So this wasn't necessarily part of some nefarious plan. They just had really stupid rules. So that I had to, again, vote as me, walk it into our county elections office and say, here's my vote again. I know you just saw me yesterday, and sent him to vote in person in the primary. So learn all of these little rules and tricks, because there's all these dumb things that will snag you up, and that you just need to be mindful of, because while they will cheat, they also will just be nitpicky about the rules. So to make sure that your vote counts, you have to do both and do it in mass, so that we're running up the numbers, so that when they take off that little percentage point, it don't matter. So that's my answer to these different conspiracy theories. Is it's not necessarily a conspiracy if they're out to get you, but that does mean you carry mace on your keychain so that you're prepared. So we gotta get our electoral mace.
Analogies tonight, y'all. Kelly is killing the analogies. Anyone else from the panel? I think that kind of covered, we do have some questions that are pouring in as far as directing straight to me. So I'm going to hold those because they kind of fit with the next question. So as another, sidebar to that, or another caveat to that question, as far as hacking, mail-in ballots, electronic voting, another concern is that for millennials, when we go to vote, if we go in person, there is a lot of voter suppression that's still going on, and these new rules that they are putting in place, whether it's to have additional ID or additional documentation with you to show you are who you are, you live where you live. When showing up to the poll, you have to have all these additional documentation. So what is really required when you go to vote, whenever you do, whether it's on election day or early voting, and what are those required items? And then what happens if someone tells you that you can't vote, or they're trying to prohibit you from voting? What should they do if that happens on that day?
So every state's voter ID laws are different. So I don't, assuming that everybody here is in Texas, or those who are watching from other places, please look up your own voter ID laws for your state. But I believe for the state of Texas, you just need a government issued ID, and then you can vote. It has to be a government issued ID in the state of Texas for you to be able to vote. I think I'm correct on that. I would say, and if someone tells you you can't vote, vote anyway, plain and simple. Just you don't even have to get into an argument. Don't try to get into no back and forth. Just say, I'm voting anyway. And then make them put you out. Because that creates a whole nother, I always say, let's create Edmund Pettus Bridge moments. You're a citizen of these here United States of America. And so you have every right to vote, just like everybody else. The other thing I would say, again, I'm going to say this again, become a poll worker, particularly speaking to millennials and the generation coming after millennials, because usually poll workers are our elders and our senior citizens. And because of COVID, we don't want them putting themselves in danger. And a lot of them just won't be able to show up. And so become a poll worker. It is a paid gig. I believe it's like $11 and some change an hour here in Texas if you take the gig. So it's a paid gig. You just got to sit there and make sure that people vote. That's your job. So become a poll worker. These are ways that we can help.
Awesome, Rev. Awesome. Who else from the panel? Kelly?
I'll go for, sorry. For the state of Pennsylvania, you only need an ID the first time you show up to a specific location. So if you moved and it's a new place, then you need ID. But other than that, you don't. You can be a government issued ID. You can bring a pay stub. It just has to have your name and address on it. The pay stub thing is a new thing that we did in the last couple of years to try to make it more accessible, because we know that sometimes a government issued ID can be difficult to get. And if they say you can't vote, cast a provisional ballot. So it might be, it's a different process. It's a piece of paper, but they count it at the end and they check to see if it's actually valid or not. But definitely ask for a provisional ballot if somebody tries to deny you to vote, because there's no reason ever to deny somebody a provisional ballot, because you count it after the fact to see you check it afterwards. So there's no reason to be like, well, we're not going to do our due diligence to see if you're able to vote. No, that's the entire point of it being a provisional ballot. And then I would also say encourage folks, especially young and healthy folks, to be poll workers in Pennsylvania and Allegheny County in particular. Pays up to $20 an hour. So it's really, it's kind of our minimum wage is only $7.25. So it's really the move. We're really trying to make an effort to get people to be poll workers. So in a recession where it's almost 3 times the minimum wage, y'all need to get out here and get this poll. These are long shifts too. They're like 6 to 9. So get out here and become a poll worker. I definitely echo that, especially here in Pittsburgh area.
Tierra moving to Pittsburgh.
I was just gonna say I need to come run up a check right quick and come back to Dallas when I get paid. Cause yeah. But yeah,
it's a good check, man. I'm just saying, get out here.
There's a shortage of poll workers here in Dallas, so yeah, any millennials or anyone who can potentially be a poll worker, please be a poll worker. Not only that, we're gonna need a lot more encouragement because the voter time is gonna be a little longer due to COVID. Only a few people can go in and vote at a time. We cannot vote straight ticket. So the estimation time is pretty high for each voter. Not only that, like we're gonna have to encourage people to have masks, PPE, have snacks, have some music playing, because people, especially in the Black community, especially those who are like probably even homeschooling their kids, you gotta go to polling location with your kids, and you're gonna have PPE for them too. And it's just gonna be more of a process is what I'm trying to highlight. So we need to be encouraging our community and preparing our community to not only make a vote plan, but also include those other factors as well, and how we're gonna be out there on the front lines with them.
You know, Narissa, I want to give it up to the ladies on this panel that you've assembled, because they have been keeping it real and keeping us honest the entire time. I do appreciate it. I just posted on Facebook earlier today that we should make November 3rd, you know, a National Black Family Reunion Day. To where, I mean, we do have to get our entire families to the poll. We do have to get our brothers and sisters and cousins and aunties and uncles and all them to the poll. So why not make it a family reunion? Why not make it a family trip? Why not have somebody, have Cousin Junebug down the street with his barbecue grill, you know, feeding people, because we know these lines are gonna be long. I mean, why aren't churches organizing those kinds of feeding initiatives to make sure people are entertained while they're in line and also fed in line, and also make sure that there's accessible masks out there, because you know somebody's gonna forget their mask at home. You know, why not make this a family affair and show up and show out to make sure that change does happen this year, to make sure that there's no question as to like what the people want versus what the college or what the electoral college wants. Because we know that that's going to be a question indeed, like just like it was last year. And I saw that question come up in the chat, so I look forward to the question that Narissa is going to ask. But like, we do need to make this a family affair and just get out the vote, and also bring out our light-skinned cousins that are less melanated than us, our Latino cousins that speak different languages and have different items on their menus. So like, we need to make this a family affair for change to really happen.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Have been phenomenal answering. Or go ahead, Attorney C.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to add a little bit about the Texas requirements. Your ID has to, if you're under the age of 70, has to be either current or expired within the last 4 years. So keep that in mind. If you're over 70, it doesn't matter. And so if you have an ID that's expired, you can still use it as long as it's within the 4-year period. The second thing is that there is, and this was tried with the Texas Supreme Court, but if you have a reasonable impediment for being able to obtain an ID, a picture ID, then you can sign an affidavit when you go to vote, and they still have to give you a regular ballot, right? So there's not a whole lot of case law on this, but if you do have an impediment, so say that you lost your ID a week before and haven't had a legitimate time, you've been working full time, you haven't had a time to go get it, then you can ask for an affidavit. You sign the affidavit and they have to give you an actual ballot. And then in terms of the provisional ballot, just keep in mind, when you cast a provisional ballot, you have a time period, normally between 3 and 7 days, to go back to the county elections department to prove up that you are the person that cast the ballot. So if they say you can't vote, like Kelly and Edwin said, ask them for a provisional ballot. Once you get the provisional ballot and you vote, remember, after that, the next day or next couple days, you need to go down to the county elections department and show them your ID or show them some kind of proof, whatever they're asking for, to prove that your ballot can count. And then your provisional ballot moves from provisional to an actual ballot that counts. So.
Thank you for that. A rebuttal from someone here around that being a poll worker. Can you only be a poll worker in your assigned county that you live? Go ahead, Rev. Edwin, I think you were going to say it.
Oh, I was just about to Google because I don't know the answer.
It's okay. It's all right. And if you don't know, that's all right. Again, we will provide the questions, and if we don't know, we can definitely find and search out the answers.
I was going to
go ahead.
In Pennsylvania, no, it's just a state residency requirement, so you can go over anywhere within the state. With technically, we're Commonwealth, but anywhere within the state, you can go and serve as a poll worker. And then I was also going to say that 7 days after the election, they automatically determine whether or not you were eligible. They look into it for you. You don't have to take any additional steps in the state of Pennsylvania to get your ballot counted. So whether you trust the process or not is a different question, but you don't have to go take any additional steps beyond that, beyond casting it in Pennsylvania. But I'm optimistic, again, because we are governed by both parties, so everybody has an interest in keeping the system honest, as we have, again, a fairly liberal Democratic governor, but also a fairly conservative House and Senate.
Thank you for that. We'll definitely do some research as well. I think that question was coming from more of the DMV, Virginia area. So we will definitely do some research to find out. But again, research, if it's something interesting to you, research to find out what you need to do, make some phone calls, but really Google, like Rev Edwin said, Google is going to be your best friend, and he is Googling right now. We do have two final kind of panel questions, and we're getting to Miss Brenda's question about the popular vote, but let me go back up and ask one question that came in the chat. So it's important to vote, but if your state is usually a known state for opposing your choice. So if you have like a red state or a blue state and they're like, oh, well, I shouldn't vote because, it's automatically going to go to whatever color it's assigned, right? I mean, what would you say to someone who is like, it's my state is usually known for opposing the choice. So what would you tell them to do in that case?
It's only a historical trend if y'all let it be.
What
if everybody stays home because they think everybody else gonna vote? That's how you wind up with your dishes not done, right? Everybody thinks somebody else gonna do it, and it's overflowing. You gotta take, it's your responsibility and your right to vote, and you gotta take it seriously, and nobody else can do it for you but you.
That's shade right there, because I got dishes in my own kitchen that need to be done.
I do
too. But that is a good point.
That's a great point. I mean, don't allow people to take your voice away from you. Don't allow, these different things that are coming up to deter you from accessing advocating for your voice, exercising your voice, and voting. Don't allow those things to happen. Vote regardless. Okay, so our two questions, and then we are going to open it up for those that are on the line for a general Q&A. If we have not touched on your questions, you are more than welcome at that point to unmute your lines and ask our panel questions. In the meantime, again, we have the chat that I am monitoring. So again, two last questions for the panelists. You all have been phenomenal. The next one, some millennials feel that there is a concern around the popular vote versus the electoral vote. So in the previous election, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but then Trump won the electoral vote. So why is this the case? What's the difference between the two? And you know, who really wins? Should the popular vote win the presidency? We'll start with Attorney C, just because you just seem very relaxed back there.
Okay, so this question is pretty loaded. And I'll just give like the historical aspect of this, right? So the Electoral College is rooted in a racist ideology. And that is a fact. So if people are upset about the Electoral College choosing our president, they have every right to be. Because when you look at the 3/5 compromise being a part of our founding documentation, the reason the Electoral College even exists is because Southern states who did not have the population as the New England states wanted to make sure that the folks in the North did not decide the question of slavery. And so allowing the Electoral College to be based on not just the population, but also every state getting at least 3 electoral votes is what the Electoral College is rooted in. And so it really was a way to help protect slavery and make sure that the Southern states had some way to blunt the impact of the population in the Northern states. And so that's number one. The number two with the Electoral College is that a lot of folks don't really understand exactly what's happening. So there is a popular vote component to the Electoral College. It's just like each state gets to pick their team captain. So what happens is in the primary process, during that primary process, both parties, Republicans and Democrats, they pick their team captains to say, hey, as the Democrats, we nominate Kelly, Edwin, and Kirsten to be our team captain. So if our state elects the Democrats, then they're going to be the ones to go cast their vote for our Democratic nominee. And so within each state, your vote does matter because you're picking the captain that you want to go to cast the vote for the top of your ticket. Kelly, I'm stealing your analysis, girl. You better come with some on this one. But that's the way we kind of got to think about the Electoral College. Now, whether or not, I don't agree with it, and I do think it's time as a country to have a conversation about whether or not the Electoral College should be put in place. And that's something that as Democrats, or I can only speak for myself, but as a Democrat, I think should be a part of our agenda of do we want to continue with this because we know that Black and brown people live in about 15 states in this country. That's it. We're not living in Montana. We're not living in North Dakota. We're not living in Alaska. We're just not. And so the fact that they have, Wyoming, for example, has less than 1 million people. They have just about as many people as Washington, D.C. Okay, and Washington, D.C. obviously doesn't get to directly elect its legislature. But my point by bringing that up is that are we going to continue to allow these states that are heavily white populated to control, and not only that, not just control the Electoral College, but they also control the Senate too. The reason the filibuster's on the table now is because you got folks in middle America where Black and brown folks don't live who get to block legislation, who get to appoint Supreme Court justices, you know what I'm saying, and really determine sort of the future of our country. So number one, that is sort of how the Electoral College was created. It's what it does. It's like picking team captains, but also, in my opinion, it should be abolished.
I wholeheartedly agree. My points, my any differences are minor. But yes, I wholeheartedly agree. It not only does the Electoral College system have all of those problems, but it also chooses our candidates. They lean on Pennsylvania now, like, hey, y'all so important. We need every single person here to vote and vote this way, but you eliminated our choices. If you want our opinion now, if you need us to save your behinds from the fire, then maybe you should have asked us at any point before June 2nd, our primary was June 2nd. Everybody says all over TV, it's going to come down to Pennsylvania, but June 2nd, it was done. You didn't ask us if we wanted pizza or Chinese. You said you have pepperoni pizza and you're going to eat it, and you're going to eat the whole thing, is what you told us. And it is now practically October, and that's what we're going to do. So the Electoral College screws up more things than just choosing, senator selection and making the ultimate decisions. So yes, I believe it absolutely should be abolished. However, as Black folks in America, we deal with the systems that we are given, right? This is not how, oh, I'm going to have pizza, Miss Brenda, but I'm gonna eat it all. But we work with the systems that we're given, which are not ideal and were not created for us. But in some ways, it's almost terrible to think that was the greatest mind bend of law school to me, was realizing why I should be happy that we were 3/5 of a person. Because had we not been 3/5 of a person, had those Southern states been able to consider us a whole person for voting purposes, we'd have never got remotely off the ground. And that was the kind of like, at that point, but we're working within the systems that we were given. I'm gonna get back on track, sorry. And everybody that I've heard that's present at this table, there's states in play. If we show up and show out, we can win Pennsylvania and swing this election. You can show up. And Texas is a little purpley right now. You can turn it, it can get blue if you show up and show out. So while we work within the systems that we're given to get this win so that we can change the rules. But if we don't show up and get those wins, we will never be in a position to change those rules. So I would say that it makes it even more important, especially for the folks on this call and anybody else that finds themselves in what I call a purple state instead of a swing state, to really show up, show out, and so that we can make some of these more systemic changes that will be to our benefit.
So as one of the questions popped up, Ms. Brenda had asked, and then Edwin, I'll give it to you. That's what she's asking. So is there a way to compromise or swing that the Electoral College vote a certain way? And you're saying if you get out to vote, that will then elect the right people to where we can swing that. But that's, you're saying, is the only way that we can do that, right?
Yes, but I would also say that in your, we talked about voting in every election. That's critically important too, because there are a number of state legislators that are taking up whether or not they want, there are some states that are saying, hey, we want our state to be tied to the popular vote, not just of our state, but of the country, because they don't want to be the person that, really set a Donald Trump or somebody over the top. They don't want to be the next person that, year 2000, that was an issue. It keeps popping up. And they don't want to be the one that says, well, we were the Electoral College victory that set somebody over the top. So those are the things that are also happening in your state and local elections, that people are starting to talk about these things. And you could make a difference and an impact on that level as well. But also, we're in a general, that's a presidential election. So it's very important to vote yourself to get your state in the right Electoral College column.
Right. Reverend Edwin, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one, we like everything that everybody said, forget the Electoral College is trash. Yet it still exists, right? However, like there are some individuals. I think there was a cat. There's a cat out of Texas, Christopher Supron, I think is his name. But in the last election, he did not vote for Trump. He was an elector and just went against the system, right? I think that I say that to say I think our country is actually in that polarized of a place that we will see that during this Electoral College. This whole election is going to be quite an event. But I also say outside of that, it's important still to go vote because the presidential election is almost never the only election on your ballot. So, there's a whole bunch of other elections that have nothing to do with the Electoral College that'll be on your ballot. So still show up because it's more than just the president.
Thank you. Any other panelists want to add
I just did a little bit of homework, and found out that in 2016, Senator Barbara Boxer, a Democrat out of California, introduced Senate SJ Res 41, a joint resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States to abolish the Electoral College and provide for the direct popular election of the President and Vice President of the United States. It didn't gain traction. And I don't know where Senator Barbara Boxer is now, but I do know that with AOC and Ayanna Pressley and the squad on the Hill now, as well as many other prominent House members, there might be a opportunity to be able to reintroduce a similar bill or a better bill in the next Congress, in the 200 or the 117th Congress. I think that's going to be the next iteration of the Congress. So all that to say, we got to vote to get the right people in place in order to introduce these kind of pieces of legislation that are meant for our equitable good and Black and by proxy all flourishing. So if we don't use it, we lose it. And quite honestly, I'm sick of losing, because these past 4 years have not been winning at all, especially with 200 people in the ground, 200,000 people in the ground over some bad decisions and refusal to make good, and to recognize a bad situation coming down the pipeline. So like, please, just stop all the, this is a plea for my younger brothers and sisters, and for some of my older ones too. Just stop the excuses. Just get out and vote. Just do it.
Absolutely. Well said, well said. And I think for the very last question, again, then we'll open it up. Attorney C literally just kind of walked through some of that process, but the last question is, it really explain how voting works. Explain the process of how the Electoral College is, then impacts the legislation of passing policies and laws with the House and the Senate. Of course, we can go back and watch some, YouTube videos, or if there's clips or videos that, we want to shoot to say, hey, after this, you need to go and watch this to get kind of an overview, but very high level. How does the voting process work? Because you would be surprised by how many millennials do not know how our government works. And so why it's important to vote, because it impacts policies and legislation down the line. Tell us how voting works overall. Attorney C, you're already smiling, so you already know, leaning back in that chair. Go ahead.
No, I think we sort of addressed this on a couple different levels. There are obviously multiple levels to voting. And like we mentioned earlier, in May of every year, you're going to vote. If you're in Texas, if you're in Dallas County, which I think a lot of people will get this, probably are, you're going to vote for school board and city council every single May right now. In November, you're going to be voting for something. You could be voting for the president, you could be voting for the governor, but you could also just be voting on a constitutional amendment. So those things are what take place every year in the state of Texas. Beyond that, every other year in the presidential and midterm years, you'll have what's called a party primary. And that's where you choose your Democrat or Republican nominee to run for Congress, to run for state house, to run for your local judgeships, and that sort of thing. And so those are sort of the major 3 dates to keep in mind. And I think we went over the Electoral College question a little bit presumptively. So I think we've covered that. But again, it's like picking a team captain. That once the Electoral College chooses the president, then their role in this is done, right? So after that, the president is elected, our Congress people are elected, and then the Congress writes the bills, send it to the president appoints Supreme Court justices. So that's sort of how, I guess, broadly it works. But the Electoral College is just a system to elect the president. And beyond that, they really don't have a role in governing our country.
I would just add to that the electoral college, those types of numbers correspond to the
Yep.
amount of people we have in the House of Representatives. So if you're a big congressional, if you're a big electoral college win, that means you've got a lot of folks in your house, and you really have the opportunity to set your person up for success by giving them the right people on their team that are not going to be like, no, every time they try to do something, and really support their efforts and enable them to move things forward. So that's not directly the electoral college, but every every even year, we are electing Congress. Everybody's up for grabs, and this is really your opportunity to set your candidate up for success. And they're going to try to set their candidate up for success because they see how well it works in the Senate to have people all of the same team kind of just rubber stamping everything that you do. But again, those numbers correspond, and I don't think a lot of people realize that that's really your opportunity, especially if you're in DC, where you're not getting an elector in the electoral college to really, that's really unfortunately the only place you have to really make an impact in national politics is on your congressional race, which is tangentially related to your to the electoral college.
Which is also related to the census.
I was
So-
just about to say that.
Go ahead, Kirsten, you got it. You got it.
Well, I was just going to say that the census determines how many representatives you have in the House, which is why it was so vitally important that you fill out your census. I don't even know if it's still going on. I filled mine out as soon as I got my
It
information.
is September
You
3rd.
have 6 more days. You got till the 30th.
You got 6 days because this is the next 10 years of what your electoral college, well, hopefully not 10 years. Hopefully we get rid of it in like the next 4 years, but the next 10 years will determine how many House of Representatives you have for your state. So everything is like so interconnected and intertwined, and the census is, that's why the census is so important in all of this.
And that's why they have not been promoting it as heavily, because they don't want certain folks counted to get greater representation. So it's super, super important to fill out the census. I think we can get a link going in the chat. But yeah, but actually even it carries on beyond the 10 years, because it's not like the data stops. It's 2020 and I'm in meetings where we're like, oh, we're determining our census, like our COVID exposure rates by race based on 2010 census data, because we don't have new data yet. And they're like, well, American Community Survey, sorry, I don't want to get in the weeds, but that's just an estimate. That's how you estimate the census in between, how many people are where. They're like, our last solid numbers are 10 years old. So when you think about how this is going to affect folks, it's the 10 years, but it's also beyond, because you're making decisions in that 10th year, in that 11th year, based on that old data. So it's critically important that we all fill that information out. I know you don't want the government to have all your information, some people, but they got it anyway. We on Facebook, we Zoom in, they got our phones. If they want to find our information out, if they want to be in our business, they in it anyway. So just give them the information you need to get our Congress people together.
And I would just add, just for educational purposes, like voting in general, like I just always feel the need to remind folks, especially younger folks, just about the 3 branches of government. A lot of times there's a disconnect in that. There's a disconnect in knowing, like, what can the president do and what does the legislative branch do and the judicial branch. Like for me, even being formerly incarcerated, I didn't know we elected our district attorney until, I came home and it was like, oh, there was a DA election, or we elect our judges, we elect all these officials. So it's important that we make it plain for folks, letting them know like what these folks can actually do and what they can and cannot do, and encourage them like, this is why you want to vote for your state reps, and this is why you want to be engaged on the presidential, because a lot of times the presidential election is the only one that people are really funneling people to and pushing, more so amplifying, when we need to amplify these local elections as well, because a lot of the times they're those elections really hit home. And those, a lot of times when you door knocking or canvassing or you know, if you're block walking or making calls, people are going to say their reasons for not voting. A lot of times it's going to point at something that the legislative branch could fix, or something that they've experienced from the judicial branch, or you know, a lot of times they're pointing at the president for something that a local official or a state official could definitely have changed. So I think there's a lot of ways of education in regarding to making it hit home for folks, like what these folks can do to our day-to-day lives, that we have to be consistent with in education.
Yeah, I think Tiara for bringing that up, because yeah, the most common rebuttal that we've heard, I mean, that we hear, I mean, I don't know if y'all hear it or not, but I've heard it more often than not, that the system is keeping me down. Well, which system are you talking about? And who plays into that system? And how can that system be dismantled, or how can it be disrupted in order for better to happen? You know, if we drill down and you know, stop being and not be surface level with our responses, with our excuses, but actually commit ourselves to becoming more informed, you know, then we'll start to see more of changes happening, right? One of the things that President Obama spoke during during John Lewis's funeral is that, you know, our success as a country depends on informed and engaged electorate, right? So how can we expect things to change when we don't know what the system entails, or what the various systems entail? And how can we expect for things to come out in our favor when we refuse, or when we have excuses to actually participate in that system? You know, when we know better, we do better, right? And why not participate in our own liberation and call our friends and family into that participation as well? So if we can, it's demoralizing being on Capitol Hill and, you know, hearing the constant barrage of negative news that's coming out of the White House, let alone across the street at the Congress building, you know, and also all throughout the country. But we have to understand that this is not by happenstance. This did not come by surprise. It came by design, because it's taken years and strategic people putting people in strategic places in order to make sure Trump has a successful presidency, right? It's taken years for Congress to be filled with persons like Matt Gaetz out of Florida, and Ted Cruz out of Texas, and many of those others that's continuously co-signed on his crap. I'm sorry, I apologize to the elders in the room, but I just wanted to make that point. It's taken us a while to get to where we are, so how much longer are we going to allow this to happen? I know I'm voting. Yeah. How about y'all?
Last thing, there's an artist called Yellow Pain. He has a song called.
Just put it in the chat.
Oh, I was gonna say send it to the
We're gonna close it.
Yes.
We were gonna close with that. Yes, ma'am. I was gonna pray and then play that video. Yes. You on it here. Well, it has been absolutely a phenomenal time. Those were the panel questions that I had. I want to thank all of you, but now I want to open briefly for those that are on here. If we have not asked a question that is really burning for you, or you want to find out more, now is your time to unmute your line or put it into the chat and we can read it for you. But now is your time to unmute your lines and ask your question to our panelists.
Madam Chair, I'm Blue Jean Garrett, and I know Christian Whitekins. I think you attend the same church as myself and my husband, Kirkwood Temple CME in Dallas.
Yes, ma'am. It is me. It is me.
You, oh my God, I'm so proud of you. And I know Warren C. I'm Garrett.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Sister, I have enjoyed listening to you millennials tonight. I tell you, I have really learned a lot. I am a senior citizen, but I've learned a lot. Okay, I've enjoyed listening to you guys, so I'm going to just shut up, and I'll have to do a shout out to Kirsten.
God
Kirsten
bless
Cowan.
you. Thank you, ma'am, for joining. God bless you. They have been phenomenal. They are
I
phenomenal.
have enjoyed it.
Yes.
Auntie.
That's our auntie. I know that's right. Anyone else have a question? Now is your time to unmute your lines and ask your question to our panelists. All right. If nothing else, we will again be posting this on the Hamilton Park Facebook page, the link that will be on our website. You can reach out to me directly. I will put my email in here so that way you can, I can send you the link personally if you would like. All of our panelists will get the link to the recording. They can post it wherever they like or take snippets of it. But again, it has been a phenomenal discussion. I really appreciated everyone's breadth of knowledge that you all have. You all are expertise in your own right in different fields. So again, Attorney Warren C., thank you. Attorney Kelly Warren Sebron, Reverend Edwin Robinson, Minister Kristen Watkins, and Sister Kirsten McCowan. We thank you all. Sister Tierra Cooper, thank you for being our wonderful panelists and providing all of your wealth of knowledge. I am going to pray at this time, and then I am going to share my screen and end with our video, and you all can get a couple of minutes back before 9 p.m. Central Time. I know some of our Eastern folks, it's late for you. So again, thank you for your patience and your faithfulness being on. So let us pray. Dear God, we thank you for tonight. We thank you for the patience and the diligence of those that even came out via, taking up their time to dial in with their phones, to listen on their iPads or computers. We thank you just for the time to get the knowledge, God. We want to be not only hearers of your word, but we want to be doers, God. And so we claim that we are going to not only get out our family and friends, but we are going to text them. We are going to call. We are going to ask everyone if they're registered to vote, to make sure they go out and vote, to do carpools. And if they are not registered to vote, God, in the state of Texas, we're going to do it before October 5th, Lord God. And in other states, we're going to make sure that we get out and register to vote before the deadline date. God, we want to exercise our voice to make sure that this world knows what we stand for, that we stand for justice, just like you stood for justice. We stand for equality and for equity for all people, God. And so, God, we pray right now a covering over everyone. God, we heard the news yesterday and it may not have fit what we wanted. We may not have received justice for Breonna Taylor, but God, we know that there is something that you're going to end up working for our good, that it may not be good while it's working, but we claim and prophesy and speak right now, God, that it will end up working out for our good. Even those with this coronavirus and those that are still struggling financially and physically and mentally, spiritually. God, we ask your covering to be upon everyone right now in the name of Jesus. We speak healing, we speak wholeness, God, and we ask that you would cover and protect us. God, you be the hand and the guardian, the overseer in this election, God. When early voting starts to the end, God, your will be done. We thank you on tonight. We ask that you would give us rest. Bless our panelists, God. We could not pay them, but we ask, God, that you would grant blessing and favor and open doors and networks and connections that, God, money cannot buy. We thank you, God, and we count it done in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Let me share my screen. We're going to play this. Thank you all for joining.
More than 270, more than enough to become the 44th president of the United States. He will be the first African-American president of the United States.
I've been broke all my life, but I kept hope all them nights. You see business in my city? Yeah, they closed all them twice. I was just riding down Salem, all them damn potholes I can't drive. I know y'all can fix it faster, but I know y'all won't try. Nobody care about us, and that's why I'm voting. Voted for Obama back in 2012. I remember that's when I had hope. He was saying, yes, we can. And everybody got less food stamps. And when I turned 21, I was still broke. I'd never vote again. I don't think I ever had a president make my life better. Did it out on my own. Ain't no politician ever do a nice gesture. I don't even know the man's name. I ain't never seen her one time ever. Tell me how she gonna help the city. What I'm supposed to do, write letters? What I'm supposed to do, blame Trump? he ain't never really gave a Ain't nobody raise minimum wage. None of these jobs pay enough. I think they just want to keep us broke, cause they ain't putting nothing in place for us. This how all my people feel, but we gotta learn. We complained enough, let me change it up. Everything I just said, everybody I know think the same way. See, they don't want to see us vote, and we never do, so we see the same thing. But all our votes really do count, and they'll never really let it show. So now I'm finna break it down, cause if I don't, you will probably never know. First thing first, you know back in middle school when they taught us, it was 3 branches of the government. We forgot it when we got older. It's the judicial, the legislative, and executive. But all we know is the executive. That's the mayor or the governor and the president. Now none of them 3 people make no laws, they just be checking it. The laws come to their desk and all they do is say no or yes to it. So when the news station tried to tell us that Barack Obama couldn't put us on, we was all salty at Obama when it was the Congress members all along. We gotta focus on the legislature. Yeah, they the ones that laws. Yeah, they the ones write how much food stamp money you get on you. But when people that wanted to help us wanted the job, I know they probably lost. Cause we ain't even know their name, we ain't know their face, we know it all. So the Congress or the State House, that's legislative, they make laws. So what we want from the president is what they do. Okay, y'all? See, they election every 2 years, but we don't never even go to those. The Congress, they can raise minimum wage, but we ain't even really know it though. So you know how back in 08, when we all voted for Obama, we was all supposed to go back in 2010 and vote for the Congress. Cause they the ones make child support laws. They the ones choose if your kids at school get to eat steak or corn dogs. The State House make the court costs. So if the country failed, then you can't say it's them, it's your fault. Cause y'all ain't know to vote for Congress members that was for y'all. And they don't gotta leave after 4 years, and we just let them sit. See, they don't wanna tell you this, they want you to focus on the president. Now the third branch is the judicial, that's judges. They the reason why John Crawford and Trayvon ain't had justice. So when Meek Mill got locked up just for popping willies, we blame the judge and not the city when they let her get voted in, cause they ain't know who to vote against. Imagine life on the other side. Roads better, schools better, everybody get their license back, grocery store food better, custody of your kids back, homeless people get new shelters. If we gon' fix the U.S., we gotta start with them 2 letters, me and you. Somebody told us that the government wanna keep us broke, but the only reason why those people in the government is cause we ain't vote. And I ain't talking about the president, I'm talking about the ones we ain't know. See, they was gonna try to keep it low, but it's gonna hurt them when they see the pros.
Every time you stay home, someone is making a decision about you, making decisions about the air you breathe, the water you drink, the food your kids eat, and how much money you bring home every 2 weeks. So every time you sit out an election, every time you don't show up because you think it doesn't matter, someone else is happy that you didn't show up, so they can make that decision for you. Vote.
Thank y'all.
Awesome.
Wonderful time. Thank y'all. Have a good night.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome, awesome.
Thanks, everyone. See you.
We just had the most amazing family vacation